Gamers, the wait is finally over. Dawntrail is here. Early access started Friday morning. And while I wasn't able to call out of work and go full goblin gamer degenerate mode all day, I did wake up early to get a good little look-see at what Dawntrail has on offer for us. So that's what we're talking about today. Before we do that though, don't forget Mountain Dew has a campaign right now. If you redeem the code under caps of Mountain Dew, you can get in-game items and other goodies. So while we go about recording this video, I'm going to go ahead and enjoy myself a Mountain Dew. It's diet though, which I think doesn't taste as good, but I think should be okay to drink. Quick heads up, this video is going to have some minor details about the story, nothing that hasn't been mentioned at FanFest or in the marketing materials for Dawntrail. But if you're the kind of person who's very sensitive to the story, then you probably didn't click this video, and I'm probably wasting my time. You know what's not a waste of time though? Leaving a like and subscribing to my channel. Is that good? That's a pretty good gag, I think. Okay, let's just get into it. Let's just talk about what I experienced during Dawntrail. I took some notes for you guys, and we're just going to run through them real quick. All right, so let's start. First thing that you're going to notice when you load into Dawntrail, especially if you've played the game before, is the graphics update. So Dawntrail is Final Fantasy XIV's 7.0 version, and it comes with a massive graphics overhaul. The biggest change, I would say, isn't to textures, it's actually to lighting. The in-game lighting engine, from what I can tell, has seen a huge revamp, and it's very noticeable. The way that lighting interacts with objects in game now is very much up to the 2020 decade era of standards. Final Fantasy XIV is over a decade old at this point, and there's no getting around that. Even with a graphics overhaul, you're not going to change the fact that this game looks a little dated. It just does. There's no getting around it. However, the way that lighting has been revamped really makes it feel a lot more modern. The lighting being huge doesn't mean that other things haven't been improved. Character models have been improved a lot. Skin textures have been improved. It's super noticeable. The way that eyeballs interact with light and the way that eyes sort of give life to your character, especially depending on like the scene that they're in and the lighting, it's just a huge improvement. Lips as well. Lips are super noticeable. Look at the lips on any character now. They are amazing. They are perfectly up to like 2024 standards. Zones as well have seen a new improvement, even older zones. So the first thing that I did was run around in a bunch of older zones because I didn't have the newer ones unlocked yet, of course. And you can tell just like when you're walking around in zones that are like expansion or too old, the foliage just appears a lot more dense, and they can't quite get away yet from like those flat upright textures. So like when you're looking at them from above, it doesn't look as good. But when you have a normal camera angle, foliage just looks a lot more dense and a lot more natural. I'm not sure exactly what they've done. And kind of like a little bit of a note here that I should probably include. I'm not a game developer. I'm not an artist. I don't have like the best vocabulary to talk about all this stuff, but just as a casual consumer, I would say that the graphics overhaul is extremely noticeable. It hasn't changed the game in like an absolutely revolutionary way. Like you're not going to log in and think, oh my god, I thought I was logging into Final Fantasy XIV, but this looks like Final Fantasy XVI. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. However, Final Fantasy XIV does have its own unique art style. The graphics definitely remain true to that style, but definitely make it feel a lot more modern. It's a lot less embarrassing to look at other MMOs now. Another big change to the graphics, look, immersion, visual side of the game is the introduction of 2 dye channels to a lot of gear. And that further enables characters to customize the appearance of their character. And when Yoshi P announced this at FanFest, it was to massive applause. Everyone was super psyched about it. And while I think in some cases the 2 dye channels is as amazing and totally deserves that applause that people gave it at FanFest, in other ways it kind of falls short. But I should also include a note here that at FanFest, Yoshi P did mention that the 2 dye channels and the graphics update as well, the thing that I just talked about previously, these are things that are like sort of ongoing updates. They're things that were introduced in Dawntrail in a massive way, but are not really meant to be considered completed projects. He's mentioned before that as they continue to go forward with like the 7.1, 7.2, on and on and on patches, they're going to continue making graphics updates. They're going to continue introducing 2 die channels to gear sets that don't have it yet. And I'm interested and I'm optimistic about how that's going to look. But I will also say there are a few things where they already kind of seem to have missed. Regarding the graphics update, although a lot of textures look really, really good and a lot of character models look really, really good, the fact that there are still some weird little environmental things, like sometimes it's just pop-in looking really bad, even on max settings, which is what I play on. And in some instances, like for certain hairstyles, there'll still be like weird seams or lines that are clearly not intended to be there. Those are mistakes that I'm pretty sure are going to get ironed out with time. However, I will say there are a few things, specifically when we're talking about like the 2 die channels, where the choices that are clearly intentional are also very questionable. And what I mean by that, if you've been on the Reddit, if you've been looking at like Final Fantasy XIV content lately online, you may have noticed a lot of people have been pointing out that for certain items, for certain pieces of gear, the second die channel is being applied to something that doesn't really seem to make any sense at all. Like there'll be, for instance, like a set of boots, right? And the main leather fabric that makes up the boot will be the first die channel. And maybe there's like a sole underneath, like rubber sole on the bottom that's clearly visible from the outside. And you would naturally assume like, oh, maybe that's what the second die channel is going to do. Or, oh, maybe the second die channel will affect the laces, but what it actually affects the little circles that the laces go through, and it's barely visible at all. And it's just kind of like, a lot of people on the Reddit have been pointing this out lately, and I am in complete agreement. It just seems like a baffling decision. Like some of the choices that they've made for the second die channels just seem really weird. But at the same time, the team is open to feedback. They've shown that in the past, and we're far from being finished with introducing 2 die channels to every single object that has dies available. So hopefully going forward, they incorporate that feedback, and yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. We'll have to see. All right, moving on. Dawntrail has introduced 2 new jobs or classes or whatever you want to call them, Viper and Pictomancer. Pictomancer is very much not my speed, not my kind of thing. Viper absolutely is up my alley. It's exactly what I want. It's exactly what I think has been missing from the game. And although when I first heard about it, I wasn't super crazy, specifically just because the name Viper, like what does that mean? What is that? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But as someone who grew up playing a lot of World of Warcraft, who just loved the option to, you know, dual wield swords, dual wield scimitars, and like WoW and RuneScape and stuff like that, Viper is absolutely, totally up my alley. It is my thing. So naturally, when I got into the game at 3 a.m. Friday morning, the first thing I did, because I was a smart boy and had logged out in Ul'dah, was pick up the Viper class. Now, keep in mind, I think my Viper is like level 82 or 81 right now. I am nowhere near max level with that job. So I only have first impressions. But what I will say is Viper is, amongst Final Fantasy XIV jobs, very unique. And although it goes in the same sort of scouting role as Ninja, the 2 jobs could not play more differently. Viper reminds me actually a lot more of playing Monk than Ninja, but it's even pretty distinct from Monk. What it makes me think of is if the devs went back, took a look at Monk now, and decided to make it like a more streamlined, more straightforward class. I don't know if that makes perfect sense, but if you've had the chance to get in game and give Viper a spin, then I think you'll know what I mean. More so than anything else, Viper is flashy. And I think that's the most important thing. Viper is flashy and it makes you feel really cool to play. It's straightforward, but it's not brain dead easy. It's definitely a job that makes me feel like it has a low skill floor so that it's pretty easy to get in and be effective with it. But I feel like the more time people spend with it, the higher the skill ceiling is going to get. You're going to be able to probably get to like really high levels of play, depending on like if you're the kind of person who likes to crunch numbers with jobs, which I think is really good. And so far, I'm having a really good time with it. So before we get to the new zone, new city area, we kind of have to talk about a little bit of MSQ. I am purposefully not doing very much MSQ right now, just because this is the first expansion where I'm actually current. And so I understand that, you know, if you're the kind of person who really wants to, you can tear through the MSQ pretty quickly. Knowing that I have months and months to wait before we get 7.1 patch with new story content, I've decided to put off the story as much as I can. I think I'm going to take it at a very slow pace. But one thing that you kind of can't get around is you have to do the MSQ to get to the new zones. And for this video, I really wanted to, at the very least, get to the new city zone. And one thing I will mention right off the bat is that the MSQ rewards you by letting you get to the new city very quickly without having to do a whole lot of story. And the story that you actually do have to do is very good at picking up right where the most recent patch left off without having to like rehash a whole bunch of stuff. It just throws you right into some cutscenes that drive home that sense of this is a new epic adventure. This is unlike things that you've done before. Obviously, you have Alphino and Alizé with you, the twins, but you also have Erenville, who's a character who was just introduced in the last expansion. You have Wook with you, who was just introduced in like the last patch of story content. So it definitely does a really good job of having you feel like I am on a new story with mostly new people doing something that is separate from what we just did in Endwalker. And obviously having Ryle with you as well is a huge change to the story, as she's been one of those characters that's kind of mostly stood off to the sideline. It hasn't been as present in like, you know, the central part of what's going on in the story. That being said, I've really only done like 1 or 2 quests in the MSQ, and really just the bare minimum to get to Tural or Tuliyollal or whatever that new zone is called, and then I stopped, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. So, you know, if you want to hear about what I have to say about the story, come back in a week or 2. I'll have done a little bit more by then, and we'll talk a little bit more about it at that point. Lastly, before we wrap up, I want to take a minute to talk about Tural or Tuliyollal or whatever the new city zone is called. It looks absolutely amazing. That's the most recent place that I've reached in the story, and the reason that I haven't gone on to see some of the other zones yet is simply because this city is probably in the 20 years that I've been playing MMOs, this is probably the best MMO city I've ever seen. It is huge, it is detailed, it looks absolutely amazing. It not only does it have all the stuff that you would expect to see in like a city hub zone, it has jumping puzzles, it has you know, graphics and visuals aside, it has some of the best music I've ever seen in a city starting zone, or not a starting zone, but you know what I mean, like in a city zone. Yeah, the city is just one of the great things about MMOs is one of the great qualities they'll bring you is being able to just walk around in a city and feel like you are being immersed in walking around in like the next best thing to like a real life crowded zone, right? You know, I live in Southern California. I've spent time walking around a place like Little Tokyo, where there's a bunch of little shops set up. There's a bunch of like people, you know, natives and tourists who are just walking around having like a fun time. Tuliyollal, Tuliyollal, whatever it's called. Walking around in this city it's just such a treat. And I think part of that is going to be because I'm playing on expansion, of course, and it's my first time playing an expansion on release. But at the same time, it is just the perfect setting to have an expansion be placed on release. There's plenty of space for people to spread out and do all sorts of things and go to all these different quest locations and stuff. But at the same time, there's just so much there. It's dense, but like well spaced at the same time. Yeah, I really can't say enough good things about this. That said, one of the things I will take issue with, that I've kind of touched on, but in like a different way before, was there are still some kind of graphical bugs, in the same way that there are a few graphical bugs that they haven't quite fixed on character models. There are a few graphical bugs that they need to fix in Tuliyollal to make it like a really perfect city. And I think that kind of like leads me into what I think is probably the last thing I really have to say in terms of like day one impressions of Dawntrail, is that bugs aside, this game is in kind of a weird area. By which I mean, there are obviously some graphical issues that need to be ironed out, but putting that aside for a moment, this game feels like, well, in some ways it feels very MMO, right? The new content is spectacular, but the fact that, and I don't blame the devs for this, but the fact that so much of the game has been updated to look really good and feel very immersive kind of makes a lot of the rest of the game feel like really poo-poo doo-doo in comparison. And as forgiving as I want to be, and as forgiving as I think most people will be, I still think that is a little bit of an issue. And I want to be clear too, this is absolutely one of those things that the devs have acknowledged, and they've said they're going to go back and brush up previous zones, and it's clear just from flying around them for the little small amount of time that I have, they've already started to do that. But you know, there's only so much you can expect. They're not going to completely revolutionize the game. They're not going to go back into Mor Dhona, which was like the end game hub for A Realm Reborn, and completely change it and make it into a city hub that is just as good as Tuliyollal. Like, that's just not going to happen. Given infinite time and infinite resources, it could be done, but that's just not the world we live in. And unfortunately, I think the game is going to kind of suffer from that. And it's not just zones, it's also gear, right? A lot of the newer gear is kind of either has been introduced as being up to date with the graphical update, or the gear from Endwalker or Shadowbringers has been integrated in a way with like the 2 die channels that makes it really good. But I mean, a lot of old gear is just, it's going to look old. It's not going to be good. That's something that new players are going to have to figure out. That's probably a subject for a different video. I just kind of want to like touch on that here, just so that you guys don't think I'm just here to just be hyped about Dawntrail and just glaze it without pointing out any criticisms. There are some worthy criticisms to bring about, but I will say overall, I'm very optimistic about the game. I think it's in a very good spot right now, and I'm really hyped to see just where Dawntrail is going to go. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of you guys have probably jumped into the game already and dipped your toes in. What do you guys think? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you completely disagree? Let me know about that stuff down in the comments. I really want to hear from you guys about this. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.